Patton, and I will be presenting today the second part of our two-part series on inclusion and accessibility. I am a member of the Inclusion and Accessibility Subcommittee here at Derry, and we'd like to start with prayer, so if you'll join me. Dear God, your design is beautiful, your love extends to all and shows us how to love teach us how to engage ourselves and celebrate all people for being more. Use the strength of welcome regardless of anyone's ability. In your name we pray. So, my focus today, previously, if you caught the first two, our first program that we presented, Sue and Pam and Christy had presented about what is inclusion, or what do we think inclusion is, the biblical background for inclusion, and a little bit about what our committee in particular has been doing over the past couple years. I'm going to focus today a little more on maybe what we can do as a congregation. And so I have just a few things, and they're very general, and to be honest, a lot of things we do, so I'll point those out as I go. Our first point to make is be careful of first impressions. And this is the case with any situation. I think work situations are the same, but in a church, it's the same thing. When you first meet someone, try not to make assumptions. Well, they may be understanding you completely, just because someone may be in a wheelchair does not connote anything about their intelligence. And just because people are maybe visually impaired, they may not necessarily be hard of hearing. So just try not to make any assumptions. With all of the things we do at our church, but certainly try not to make assumptions. So brushing up on the basics, and this is really tends to be just some basic etiquette around disabilities, and to be honest, some of it changes depending on the situation. Generally, most communities with disabilities want person language, which means person with disability. There's some back and forth amongst where they refer to a lot of individuals don't feel their disability is a tragedy. They don't want to be viewed as heroes. They don't want to be, they're just living their lives. So don't assume that, this is awful. Again, get to know them and see their story. One of the things that that particularly always interested me, or was a question to me, was adjusting your posture to the eye level. I was raised with a parent who had MS and was in a wheelchair since I could almost remember. And so he was at, his level was taught at his level. And you'd be amazed how many people would simply, look down at him or talk over him, or, in the case of the next one, or maybe it's one further down here, speak to my mother who was there versus speaking to him. So another big one is asking if the person needs assistance. They may be just doing fine, and they know better than anyone else, what may be helpful. So again, it's just a relationship building thing, and find out what they may need, ideally beforehand. If you know they're coming to a service or a program, certainly ask and see what people need. Don't underestimate the abilities of someone with a disability. Basically, they're able to go out their lives and have found ways to adapt things. They're probably the best people to ideas. So go to them. Of course, as I said before, speak to the person before you speak to their caregiver or the person behind them. There's so many times where my father would be at some place and he would be asked, my mom would be asked, what does he want to eat for dinner? And she's like, I don't know what he wants, ask him. And he's had above average intelligence. Just because he's in a wheelchair didn't mean that he was cognitively impaired. And then again, this goes back to a lot of the language we use. Be cautious of using outdated or offensive terms. I think we all know what those are. Handicap is not generally a word that is in vogue now. Of course, the R word. There are just a number of terms that are considered offensive. So I would say if you're truly interested in this issue, go and kind of read and find out what those are specifically for the disabilities that you're interested in. So this one is kind of tricky because it's a little harder for, I think, your average individual. It's very dependent on both parties, and that's building a social ramp, not just a wheelchair ramp. Obviously, the physical changes that happen in the space are super easy to accomplish. Putting a ramp in somewhere, putting an elevator, those are all wonderful things and are certainly ways that will help. But the social ramps are often what people need, and that is making kind of like the first friend who's there, making somebody you can kind of go to. And there are certain people who that comes just in our congregation who that comes very easily to, who are the outgoing extroverts who will go up to somebody no matter who they are and just introduce themselves and be very, very gregarious and able to bring people in. And those are wonderful, and we don't have enough of those. But for the rest of us, me included, put yourself out there and being welcoming and that sort of thing is a hard step. So that's kind of the thing I think that everyone needs to do, no matter if somebody has a disability or not. And that's kind of key for all of this. Is, a lot of these apply to everyone, not just folks with disabilities. It's we should be welcoming. We should all be working to step out and say hello and ask how you can help. And encourage them, encourage anyone to introduce themselves to the congregation. And it's easier to do, obviously, as being a stranger coming in. It'd be nicer if someone said, "Oh, this is Bob. I just met him. He's just here for the first time." And Marie was wonderful at that. She just hook you up with somebody, and she was really good. So I think if all of us can do that, or a larger majority, that really helps to build a social ramp. So that's a really important aspect. So helping everyone to see and hear better. I think this is one thing that Derry does exceptionally well. Although if we have folks in the audience who think there's something we can do better, obviously, please let us know. But we have large print bulletins and hymnals. We project now the worship. Pretty much you can see what's going on all screens. And hearing loops are linked to the church audio system, so that a lot of people with hearing disabilities can hear what's going on. So we've done, with the physical barriers, a lot of good things for these communities. And to be honest, it helps, again, everyone to hear and see better. because I sit in the back and sometimes, just seeing the projections is nice. The next one is one that's a little more difficult, and that's essentially teaching children how things should be handled and how we should teach children, that sort of thing. And one of the really hard things to do is to give our teachers, our Sunday school teachers and our program, who run the programs, the resources that they need. And we've kind of moved in a really good way with that. If you caught Christy in our last session last week, we kind of moved in that. But give them the resources they need to keep their classrooms safe, exciting places for all students. As I said before, last week, Christy had mentioned we were able to consult with the Derry Discovery Days program and provide some education to them about ways to maybe incorporate things in their program. And I know that what used to be the Terrific Tuesdays, I don't know what it is now, with the young kids. Kid Club, there you go. Also has that same sort of program in effect, and it seems to be working well. Oftentimes, adding a second or maybe more than a second teacher to a program or classroom can make the world of difference. I mean, any child may need on a certain day a more one-on-one sort of program to be able to access what's going on. So it's super important for both the child and I think all the other folks in the program to have that. So, and another thing to consider is perhaps alternative programming may be necessary to make the programs inclusive. There are situations where an existing program may not be accessible to a child or an adult, and they may need to be broken down or just modified to have accessibility to the child. There are more than one ways to get information. There's so these kids can access it a number of ways. It does not just have to be a simple program. And I think we do a fairly good job of that here at Derry. So one thing we don't want to get to in any situation is having a teacher basically say, can't do this, it's too much, we want to avoid that. So getting that in ahead of time, getting the resources in ahead of time, and the education helps, and the knowledge that we're able to be consultants would be, is super helpful, I think, to the programs. This is another thing. I think this is harder to do. I think we do a little bit of this through our deacons help to do this, but offering ways to support families. And this is hard, everyone has a busy life. But oftentimes people with disabilities have a lot of doctor's appointments, a lot of therapy appointments, a lot of just life going on, education appointments at school. So, generally the families are really not overwhelmed, but have, some challenges. So a simple, visit or offering to stay with somebody for a brief amount of time, or, cleaning up the yard, or maybe picking up some groceries if you're going, that sort of thing. And I think we do a fairly good job. But basically, the things we do now, as people become more aware of the needs in our congregation, don't be afraid to reach out and ask. So show love to the entire family, because people often everyone has extra stressors, but families with disabilities have a lot. I think this all comes down to, ask and listen. When in doubt, ask the person. And I think it's also it's important to point out, because I should say, when in doubt, just ask. So the person who's in front of you with a disability knows what they need, so just ask them. What is also important to ask is, what do you want to try doing? What do you want to participate in that you haven't been able to do, and how can we basically make that a possibility? You know, if you want to participate in a mission, you know, a mission thing that's going on, how do we get you to do that? How is that possible? If you want to do confirmation class and, you know, you don't think that, you know, you can handle that as exists, how do we change it? And that's, you know, from our own experience, Derry's been super good at that. Basically, you know, speaking to the pastors or the education folks, you know, we can just say, you know, these things are not going to work, and, you know, they've been excellent at modifying them. So I think if you just ask, families would be more than happy to provide you with that information. And also the individuals, you know, they have something to give. They want to, you know, give as well. So ask the question, listen, and the problem, you know, it's not the problem, but the thing is then follow through. You have to then say, okay, you told me this, I have to do something with this information. So that's a key thing to do. You can't just find out the information and kind of sit on it. We need to explore ways to reach out to people of all abilities. So universal design, I don't know how familiar everyone is with universal design, but it's a concept where you build buildings or products or environments to make them accessible to all people with and without disabilities. And I think this was discussed last week by either Christy or maybe by Sue, either way. And it started out, honestly, just through an architectural kind of design. So there were physical universal design. And that was ramps, curb cutouts, elevators, pew cutouts, handbars in the bathroom, braille on the signs, that sort of thing. So those are wonderful. That kind of moved into learning universal design. It was adopted by our educators. And basically, a lot of that was creating educational curricula and programs that are able to be accessed by a number of folks, a number of different kind of learners, whether you're a verbal learner or a visual learner or someone who learns through movement. So that kind of got moved to that. Let's see. And then worship universal design. And this is kind of key, is, and we do a lot of these in our worship right now, is, you know, maybe you need to see the bulletin before to kind of go through and maybe print it out on your Braille printer. So that's an option. So we do provide our bulletins ahead of time. Having online is a good one. Our communion has gluten-free, dairy-free, nut-free options. It's basically making it universal for everyone. One of the key ones that I think we brought up in our last meetings was the use of certain wording. You know, we always say, or I shouldn't say we always say, but oftentimes it's said, you know, please stand. And, you know, that excludes a number of people who physically can't stand. So could we use the wording, please rise in body or spirit? So keeping those things in mind. Another thing is like planting, maybe in our bulletin, visuals that will indicate, you know, parts of the service. They may be helpful for people who have more visual learning minds. So, kind of summing it up, sort of. Essentially, and this is not a surprise to any of you, everyone belongs. Some people are going to make noise or move in a service That may be distracting. More often than not, the person can't control it. And it's intrinsically a part of how God created him or her. And as Christians, we're called to ensure that others are made welcome and feel comfortable. Church leaders should be proactive in modeling a welcoming, flexible, and gracious attitude. And I think that's very much been the case. But just know that people are doing the best they can, and everyone is welcome. And this is another key thing, I think. Everybody should serve. And I think we need to intentionally ask people with disabilities, what they want to do. And not assume that they can't, or not even ask. That's the key thing. It's worse than not being, or worse than making a decision for somebody is not even asking. I think of ways to make things more inclusive. Actually sit down and try. This is a hard one, but try to think about ways where we can kind of better our programs to think of those ways to be more inclusive. So, a little discussion here. And this is just kind of using everything we've learned today. This is not anybody in our congregation situation, but this was I found it on the internet, of course. And there are, you'd be surprised, a lot of stories like this. And I kind of want to see what you all would suggest that could be done either before, during this situation, or after, to kind of, hopefully keep this from happening again, or that sort of thing. So I'll just read it aloud. This family went to a church that they belonged to on a Christmas Eve. They expected this service to be a family service, and in the past the family service was child-friendly. This service was apparently not. One of the members there asked the family to leave because of the noise their daughter was making. They left and never went back. So I guess from all of you, what sorts of things could we have done, let's say before, to make that a more welcoming sort of situation? I know it's hard because you don't know whether somebody's coming to church that day or not. But you can reach out to them knowing that obviously this family belongs to this church. Yes?
Sometimes a beginning point is just the tone that the person leading the service sets. Some sort of a general announcement.
Okay.
All are welcome, children move around. And I know our pastors often make those statements. We understand kids move around, but they are, we welcome them, or some statement that kind of sets the tone.
Is there anything perhaps even before they came in the door?
Well, one thing we do here is, of course, we have kids' bags, we have coloring materials and different things to keep little ones busy.
Yeah.
Which is good, helpful for some children, not for everybody.
Yeah.
But it's one thing that we can do.
Kids' bags?
Yeah, activity bags.
Okay. So what we had said was essentially having a welcome statement by the, creating a culture, I'd say, for the congregation by the pastor and staff saying, welcome everyone. We understand that this is going to be, a long service or whatever, and, say, please move around if you need to, and that sort of thing. A second thing that was brought were activity bags. Oftentimes, keep those little hands, busy is helpful. So the person who greets them at the door could say, if necessary, the activity bags are located in the sanctuary, you know, that sort of thing. Anything else?
I would like to add one,
Yeah.
and that's from the experience. My husband was in a wheelchair for years, he was a stroke victim. And anytime you walk into an area, whether it be a restaurant or whatever, people are gonna look. I mean, they're gonna look,
Yeah,
that's fine, but make eye contact and smile.
there you go.
And that made the world of difference for us. If
Mhm.
someone would just smile, it was so warm and welcoming.
Exactly.
So if I can add that.
So I don't know if you heard, but she said just be welcoming, smile, engage the person personally. So that sort of thing. Anything else? Okay. Now how about now they're in the church. Now little Susie is, you know, having a really hard time. What can we do and not do? Anyone?
Well, hopefully, as members of the congregation, we're not going to be asking that person to leave and
Right.
make them feel excluded.
Okay. So no stink eyes.
But
So asking them to stay, well, I'm not sure.
I think,
I think
you know,
in the first place, we just want to, sometimes asking someone to stay is kind of presumptuous.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
mean,
yeah. But I think, you know, this is speaking from my own experiences, you know, if at any point someone could offer to help, you know, you know, do I need some help? And oftentimes, you know, most times, the parents have it under control. But, you know, maybe there's another child beside there and nobody else to sit with that child. So, you know, they're offer to help, I think is a big one. What else? Another one that I don't know how comfortable as a parent I would feel, but is, you know, whether the help includes sitting with another child or, you know, taking and offering to, you know, perhaps walk around if that child needs to move. You know, one of the things that I found was helpful is as parents of a kid who has some challenges, it's hard because you can't just sit and enjoy church. You can't just worship. So, I mean, the offering to help goes a long way. It's not just simply, you know, sitting with another child. It's allowing those parents that opportunity that a lot of people get, which is just sit and enjoy worship and you know, connect with God. So I think it goes a long way to the family saying, hey, this is something we invest in you. We think that you're important and that sort of thing. We're here for you. Anything else afterward? The people left. Obviously, I would guess somebody saw that happen. What would we do to follow up? Anyone? Yes.
Yeah, well, that part of it is being aware of the fact that they have left and try and encourage them to come back, basically give us another chance.
Yes. Yeah.
It's hard, and a lot of what you've described here is a situation of that we all fight, which is the me-we thing.
Mm-hmm.
Right, the parent is trying to take part in the service, and yet the child is a child.
Yeah.
The world consists of one.
Yes.
And how one makes that conversion is not easy. We've all been there. It's a question of when our kid hits it, not if they hit it.
Yeah.
But endpoints are always a problem. So if somebody leaves,
Right.
the conversation didn't happen.
Yes. Yeah.
Are we saying that to follow up?
Follow
If
up,
someone-
yes.
Okay.
Yes.
If
And
somebody
that is very
isn't-
hard because
Yeah.
that may be something only the staff notices, right?
Yeah.
Only the pastor sees the person leave. You know, it may not be that anybody else notices. So yeah, I think that, you know, that is something that, you know, but I think you basically leave a conversation open and say, you know, we noticed this. Are you okay? You know, is there something we can do to help the next time? And just, you know, not have it be like, oh, you haven't come back for like 4 weeks. What
Yeah.
up? You know,
Yeah.
kind of thing.
One of the things our staff had done, now this has been years ago since I was involved, so
Yeah.
weigh that.
Yeah.
But what we were looking at were attendance trends.
Right.
And we have volunteers who enter attendance and that kind of things,
Right.
especially for Sunday school and stuff. And if the person doesn't show up for extended periods, we had a thing that modeled their attendance
Yes.
graphically so that you could see if they were dropping off. And that,
You're a scientist, right?
if somebody, what?
You're a scientist, right?
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, but if you don't look at these trends, you don't know what's happening.
Right, right. So excellent. Yeah, so I think that, yes, follow up and certainly follow the trends and see what's happening. Ideally, more specifically with individuals, but yeah, with anyone, honestly. Because, yeah, if someone falls off for weeks at a time, you want to know what's going on in their life that may be causing that.
Right, I was just gonna add too, I mean, the follow-up, that's really important, because I know I was involved with that, and,
Yeah.
But in this particular case, I understand it was Christmas Eve, so maybe you're not calling them on Christmas Day.
Right.
But, but a pretty immediate follow-up
Yeah.
by the clergy, ideally by someone who's nearby, but I could see the
Yeah.
scenario of clergy, whoever was preaching, being aware of what happened, making a call, and again, it's always that idea, how can we help?
Yes.
What can we
Yes.
do better
Don't
next
presume,
time?
but, yeah.
Right, and ideally, maybe if they, if they're aware of who was sitting around that family,
Yeah.
that would be like a nice contact for that pastor to give one of those families a call and
Yeah.
say,
Hey.
hey, so-and-so left, we're not sure what's going on, but we want them to feel welcome.
Right, right.
So, long-term, following trends, but also something that happens immediately like that.
Right.
You need that immediate feedback.
All right. Excellent job, everyone. That was great. I think we're good. So the last thing I just wanted to show, which was super impactful to me, was we have a family that felt comfortable enough in our congregation who, when we asked to say, hey, what do you think inclusion is, and how do you feel, what kind of job do you think Derry is doing? They were willing to, speak out. Can you move this out?
Sure, yeah.
I'm kind of willing to answer our questions and speak, and I think they just did a tremendous job. So let me just see if I can bring this up, because it's really amazing to watch. So. If you can.
Cindy and I appreciate the invitation from the Inclusion Committee to discuss our experience with Derry
Sorry.
related to the church including us and being accessible. While Cindy certainly has MS, even with the progression of her disability, she doesn't feel that her diagnosis defines her. Indeed, her positive attitude influences me to the point that I can use a lift to get her from her bed and into a motorized wheelchair, and yet later realize that in many ways I don't view her as disabled. She is a daughter, a sister, a wife, a mother of an adult son, an educator. Above all, she is a woman of faith, with a love of God and a love of the scriptures that is inspiring. For us, the church is inclusive and accessible. When we can, we attend the Thursday morning GIF group meetings at the church. Every Sunday, our hope is that we will physically get to the church. And before the pandemic, I think we made it on site for a church service about once a year. Nearly every Sunday, we view the live stream, most days from our family room. During the summer, often from our back porch, and when necessary, from the bedroom. We have watched videos of issues classes and 11-minute lessons, and participated a little bit through Zoom during the pandemic. We appreciate visits from our deacon and shepherd group leader, as well as from others in the church. Having said that the church is inclusive and accessible for us, I think it is appropriate for the Inclusion Committee to seek ways to be more inclusive and accessible, seek out the opinions of others, and listen. I have learned that each disability is different, and each person's needs varies. In our case, we have been members of Derry for more than 20 years. In the past, Cindy was a shepherd group leader, a leader of a divorce care ministry, a leader of an ESL ministry, and delivered the message on a rotating basis for Tuesday evening services. For years, I was the regular accompanist for the Tuesday evening service. So we were connected live and in person before we were forced to become virtually connected because of Cindy's advancing illness. Another person with another experience might have different ideas and different needs. I think an important thing for the committee to remember is to listen without preconceived ideas about what someone needs. When I retired to become Cindy's caregiver, Cindy and I had been married nearly 25 years. I thought I knew what she needed, and I thought her biggest issue was mobility. Had I been a better listener, I would have known that fatigue was a bigger problem than mobility. Appropriately humbled, I have a better awareness that hidden symptoms may be more significant than the obvious things we think we see. While I might have missed the significance of fatigue, I always recognized Cindy's spirituality. Spirituality is something Cindy and I both share. We both had our own disciplines when we met, and our shared spirituality drew us closer together from the start of our relationship. Knowing how spiritual she is, when fatigue made it impossible for her to read, I started reading daily devotions to her, and it is something we do nearly every day. Usually it is my second devotional period of the day. While I thought I was reading for her, I have learned that I am deeply enriched by this process and find it one of the more enjoyable parts of the day, understanding that I really enjoy the entire day. For the committee, this work of inclusion and listening is God's work. In serving, we end up being blessed.
So that brings my talk to an end. I hope everyone's learned something. I certainly welcome any questions that possibly I or the subcommittee could answer. Otherwise, thank you for your attention.
You know, I might just ask the group that's here if they have any other input. You know, one of the next steps, clearly, you know, the messages are so impactful that we've heard today. And it makes us realize that going forward, we know what we've kind of known as a committee for a while,
Mm-hmm.
that we need to know where the needs are. And that means we need to listen. But we struggle a bit with just how to do that. On a one-to-one basis, it's relatively easy when you're aware that someone is struggling with something. But sometimes, I think like the first video showed us, there's individuals who struggle rather silently, and we only notice it when they either are absent or kind of withdraw from what they're usually doing. So we are really looking for ideas on what are the next best steps to make that leap to being a congregation that is listening, but also is kind of a venue for awareness. Like, how would any ideas on how to move that forward?
Yeah, let me say something so I can see you clearly. I experienced this morning coming into church, and it goes back to what you said in the very beginning about doors being open and closed. This is simple, I think, but maybe it would be helpful. The doors on our church are double doors. They're very heavy.
Yeah.
You know, I opened a door for someone I didn't know, knowing nothing about them, but if I were a weak person by myself, it would be difficult. So maybe we could consider keeping the outside door propped open with a wooden wedge, a simple thing.
Yeah.
If no one's there to greet them and open a door for them, and maybe even put something like welcome,
Yeah.
so people could see that. Make a good first impression.
So I'm not sure if anybody heard that or not. I don't know how well you picked up, but essentially, an experience that someone had just this morning was that he noted that the doors coming into church were super heavy. I've noticed the same thing. I've had a kid trapped between the doors at one point, and she couldn't get out. But yes, same sort of thing. And if we could just leave one of those doors, the front door, propped open so that it's easily accessible, and then you have the button to push if you need to. Maybe with a wedge or a welcome sign if nobody's there to greet. So just making it more welcome. I think it's an excellent idea. Thank you.
This is true.